Hi, welcome to my podcast, Reclaim. I am your host, Thaís Sky. I have supported women navigate the complexities of being human for over 10 years. This podcast is where I disseminate some of those learnings and offer thoughts and guests to guide you into your healing. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Thaís here. I am so thrilled that you are here listening to Reclaim the podcast. I do not take your attention lightly. I'm so appreciative of this beautiful community of humans who listen to my podcast, these episodes. I appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Let's get into today's episode. We are on part 5 of a series I'm doing called The Art of Depth Coaching. And today we're going to be talking about harm, and we're going to be talking about ruptures that happen in coaching relationships. The reason why I wanted to start with a conversation about harm is because I think it's really, really important for us coaches to just be keeping some thoughts, keeping a mind to the ways in which we are invited to consider the impact that we have on other people through our marketing and through our work. If you're listening to this podcast, odds are you are already very sensitive to the ways in which harm may occur in a coaching dynamic. And so I don't want this to be just another reason that stops you from doing the work that you want to be doing, but rather just for us to have a shared template, a shared lens in which I understand harm and how our responsibility to prevent harm is really an imperative part of any legitimate, long-term, sustainable, people-focused coaching business. Now, as you may have already heard, I am doing this series in honor of my mentorship. I have my newest offerings, Mentorship for Depth Coaches. I offer both one-on-one and group mastermind mentorship for coaches who want to do sustainable, long-term, thriving depth work, wants to go into the emotional wounds that exists within the humans that are sitting in front of them, want to do this work in a really ethical, grounded way, and want support around that, because we need support around these things. It takes a lot to not get sucked into the gravitational pull of the coaching industry, to stand on our own 2 feet about the values that we want to carry in our coaching practice. It takes support, because the gravity of the coaching industry is tells us to market, tells us to do our work in a way that actually can feel very disingenuous and can feel really quite yicky. And so my mastermind and my one-on-one mentorship is an opportunity for you to be around other humans who are doing it differently. And the treat that I have for all of you is that next week I will be sharing an audio recorded inside my group mentorship mastermind. And so that's going to be really cool. That's next week. But you can learn more about my mentorship by going to thaissky.com/mentorship. This is an opportunity to learn from me, someone who's been in the coaching industry for over 10 years. This is also where you can learn from me in terms of picking my mind, picking my brain about my master's in clinical psych. I will help you cultivate a lens of depth psychology for how to understand your work so that you can cultivate the skill set and confidence that you crave as a coach. And that will ripple out into every aspect of your practice. Okay, so thaissky.com/mentorship to learn more and to apply. So maybe we should start with this episode by thinking about, how do we define harm? Now, I like to, when I'm thinking about definitions, to go to my trusty dictionary, and Merriam-Webster says when they mean harm, they define it as physical or mental damage or injury, something that causes someone or something to be hurt, broken, made less valuable or successful. And so, of course, here we're probably not talking about physical harm, but we're talking about mental damage or injury. We're talking about hurting people. We're talking about how we may be marketing or how we may be navigating coaching relationships that may cause a mental injury within somebody. Now, just by the very nature of harm, This idea of harm implies that we can actually hurt people. And this goes against a lot of conversations in the coaching industry about personal responsibility, which means that if you are harmed, it's your responsibility. You got in the way of it. You allowed it to happen. You are somehow responsible for it. You manifested it. If harm comes upon you, then don't be in the victim mentality of admitting that it was harm, but rather take responsibility for how you allowed it to happen and then decide how you want to change so that harm doesn't happen again. This is a dangerous understanding of harm because the truth of the matter is humans are relational beings. We are in relationship with one another, and therefore, by the very nature of relationships, we hurt and harm other people. It is not a bad thing or a wrong thing that you asked for if you are hurt or harmed. It means that you care. It means that you feel. It means that you are a social creature. It means that you are in relationship. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about rupture and repair a little bit later on. But it's important to understand that we actually can harm people. We can hurt people. The things that we do, the words that we say, the way in which we say them can hurt other people. And that doesn't mean that it's all on them. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's all on you, but rather it's an opportunity to understand what's happening within the relationship and what's happening within you for how you want to respond to that harm. Obviously, harm can happen even if we didn't intend harm. That's obvious, right? I didn't actually intend to hit the car in front of me, but it was a mistake. It happened. I accidentally hit the car in front of me. I still created harm, right? I still created physical injury with the other person. It's really interesting how when we're talking about physical harm, we can understand it much better. I accidentally hit the car in front of me. I caused physical injury to that car or to the person in the car. I didn't intend to. It doesn't take away from the fact that I did make this mistake. And now we have the opportunity to understand the hurt, understand what I did, and understand what the other person experienced so that we can decide how we want to navigate this and how we want to proceed. But when it comes to mental injury, when it comes to hurting someone psychically, it becomes a lot more complicated for some reason. And I think it's important for us to just keep grounded in the fact that actually physical harm, mental harm are two different types of harm, but it does happen. Mental injury does happen. We do hurt other people. It is not just the responsibility of the person who was hurt to not be in the victim. And I have a whole episode, I don't remember what episode it was, about victim mentality. If I can remember it, I'll link it in the show notes. But essentially that the victim archetype exists within all of us. We don't have to run away from it. We don't have to be terrified of it. We are all victims of something at some point. And by victim, I mean something happened to us. Of course, we always have the opportunity to decide how we want to navigate that. I'm not taking away our personal power in that. But that there's actually something tremendously important about being able to name that harm happened. Okay. So given that definition of harm, given that kind of foundation of harm, let's talk about some of the ways in which I have seen coaches in general. I'm doing some general broad strokes, ideas here of how coaches can harm their clients. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, just like last episode where I talked about some of the ways that the worthiness wound may show up in our coaching practice. That's not an exhaustive list either. And there are so many caveats to this list. There are nuance to this list that I'm probably not going to address. And there are probably things that if somebody were to say, how about this? I'd be like, oh, duh, of course, I should have mentioned that. But this is the list that I came up with this morning when thinking about this episode that I think are really important. And again, it's just important for us to hold in mind, for us to really understand so that we can make the decisions in our coaching practice accordingly. Okay? Now, also, let's be clear that this list is not in any order. It's in random order. Okay. First thing right off the bat is not being trauma informed. And The thing about trauma and being trauma-informed, first, there's a difference between doing trauma work and being trauma-informed. Trauma-informed care simply means an understanding that most people come to you having experienced some type of trauma. We don't know what it is. We can't assume. So we don't want to assume that everyone has trauma. We don't know that. But we can generally assume that most people have experienced some type of trauma, and that is important for us to keep in mind in how we interact with those individuals, with any individual. If we are not trauma informed, what can happen is that we don't actually know how to listen for when those moments of trauma may come up in our work. I have worked with all sorts of coaches. I've worked with business coaches. I've worked with grief coaches, career coaches. I've worked with nutrition coaches. I've worked with all types of coaches. And no matter where you are working with, when you're talking about food, you're often talking about there may have been in the past something that really ruptured that person's relationship with food, whether it is a trauma, whether it is a wound, we just don't know. But it's important for us to understand that there's probably more happening underneath the surface than what our client is presenting at any given time. And so we just hold that tenderly. We just learn how to see, how to hold, how to be with what our clients are bringing to us, knowing that they may be holding something really painful. So being trauma-informed or not being trauma-informed, we can often bulldoze and believe that everything is just a mindset hack. And then we get confused why that's not supporting our clients. Now, even if you are not doing mindset work, let's say that you are already doing depth work, you're navigating into the emotions, and you wonder, is my work responsible? We really want to be thinking about how we are setting up the container in such a way for the client to feel like they are safe in the work that you're doing together. So how you set up your calendar, how you set up the time together. Are you in a distraction-free zone? How consistent and reliable are you? These are all trauma-informed ways that we can hold people's trauma without actually without actually tackling trauma. To do trauma work, you need to be trauma-informed, certainly, but you don't have to do trauma work if you are trauma-informed. Yeah, so this is an obvious one. And I know that trauma is so popular nowadays and everyone's talking about trauma. And I've written this before. You don't actually have to do trauma work to do really good, meaningful coaching work. And I think we're forgetting that in the coaching industry. And we're really believing that we have to do trauma work if we want to do something meaningful. And I actually don't believe that that's true. And I talk about this in my mentorship a lot. We grapple with what is our role and what can we do that can be really, really wonderful if we don't necessarily want to do trauma work or if we don't want to go into that person's trauma. And that kind of leads me into like the second place that harm can happen in the coaching relationship is when we don't know our scope of competence, right? And we don't know when to refer. And this is something that I think most of us that are listening to this episode are quite conservative about. But sadly, I don't think a lot of the coaching industry is conservative about this. Scope of competence is critical for each of us to determine. We each have to determine based on our skill set, based on our experience, based on our trainings and our knowledge, what is our scope of competence? Where are we competent in our work? And wherever our client is coming in with something that is outside of our scope of competence, we have a couple options. We can refer out, and that tends to be a really, really good and important way, or we can increase our scope of competence. This happens quite frequently where, we'll bring on a coaching client and the scope is quite clear. They want support. Let's keep thinking about it in terms of food. Like, let's say I'm a health coach and the client comes in really wanting to talk about food, definitely within my realm of expertise, right? As a health coach, just giving an instance here. Okay. Then let's say 2 months into working together, we find out that they actually experienced something quite traumatic in their childhood that has led them to have disordered relationship with food. Now, oftentimes, for our conservative minded, when we are very sensitive to not working outside our scope of competence, we'll often say something like, have you thought about working with a therapist? Or have you thought about also getting the support of, a registered dietitian, or, whatever. Have you thought about getting additional support for this? That would be really ideal, right? Like, have you worked with a therapist through this? That's beautiful. But then what happens when the client says, I haven't, I actually don't trust therapists, or I didn't have a good experience with a therapist. I'm not interested in working with a therapist right now because I have you and I want to work through this with you. Then what happens? This happens quite often. We already have a relationship with this person, and despite our attempts to get them to get further support, they're actually quite clear that they want to keep working with you on this. Then it is our opportunity to increase our scope of competence. This is where we have to be really ethical and really mindful of where are we seeking consultation, where are we getting supervision, where are we getting peer support, where are we looking for ways in which we can get support to know how to navigate this particular client's experience. This is what I offer in my mentorship. This is definitely within my scope. Is to help coaches figure out how to best navigate these very delicate experiences that our clients come to us with. Because it does happen. It happens quite frequently. We'll be working with a client in, let's say, as a business coach capacity, and then something really terrible and tragic happens in their life while they're working with us. And even though we're working with them to build their business, suddenly the coaching is derailed by this tragedy. Now, what do? Pretend like that didn't happen and keep talking about the business? What if the client wants to talk about that tragedy? It doesn't want to, get additional support for whatever reason, despite you telling them, have you thought about getting additional support? I do have some recommendations for some therapists in your area, et cetera, and they say no. Then what? Then this is within your it is now the ball is on your court for you to decide, how do you want to navigate this? What is the most responsible, ethical thing you can do to navigate this? You can certainly say, I completely understand that you want to talk about this. However, this is outside of my scope. This is outside of what I can do for you. So what comes up for you when you hear that? And how do you want to navigate that? That is definitely a possibility, but it's hard to have those conversations, isn't it? We feel so inadequate. We feel like we shouldn't say that. We feel like we don't want to fail our clients. And so oftentimes what we do is we don't get additional support because we're so afraid of feeling like a fraud, and we're so terrified of letting down our clients that we just go directly into the fire, into this really hard stuff with very little training, very little expertise. And this is when harm can happen because we just don't know what we don't know. We all have blind spots. There are things that we just don't know to even keep in mind. And it's really, really important that we don't fall into this trap. If you're finding yourself continually working with people outside of your scope of competence, that's not a sign that you are wrong or you're bad or you're doing it wrong, but it is a sign that maybe you're wanting to stretch your scope of competence, that you're wanting to do bigger, deeper work. Wonderful. Make sure that you're getting support for that. Make sure you're getting some type of supervision. Make sure you're getting some type of training for that. There's so many good things out there. You don't have to do this alone. Okay, so I tackled that. Okay, so then this leads right next to the next thing, which is to not get help. We don't get support. And this is built into our coaching industry, isn't it? We don't have this language of support. In the world of mental health, there's peer consultation, there's supervision, there's consultation. We are constantly talking to each other about our caseloads and helping us understand what's happening in our work. And of course, we're doing it in a very confidential and mindful way. I have a lot of reverence towards what my clients bring to me. And I don't want to hold it alone because I know that when I can share my mind, when I can share what's happening in my work with other people, my ability to hold space for that person increases infinitesimally. We don't have to do this alone. While the coaching industry will tell you that you should only focus on growing your business, making more money, I'm here to invite the possibility that actually when we focus on doing really good coaching work, our coaching practice grows. I have seen this for myself. I've seen this in my mentees. It is possible. It does happen. I only created a 6-figure business when I focused on doing good coaching work instead of doing all of the marketing, webinars, funnels, all of the things that everybody tells you to do. Because we're here to build a coaching business. Where is the art of coaching if we're not focusing on the art of coaching? So we don't have to do this alone. We can get help in holding the things that our client brings to us, especially if we're deepening our scope of competence, if we're doing more depth work, if we're now navigating in emotions, if our clients are coming to us with bigger, deeper things, it becomes even more important for us to get help. I would never endeavor, even now, after being in the coaching industry for over 10 years, having my master's, almost becoming licensed, I would never think that I needed to do this work alone because I'm now a quote unquote an expert. I am far from an expert. I am continually learning from experts, learning from other people. And the longevity of how long I've been doing this work isn't what determines whether or not I am a quote unquote master, but actually how committed I am to learning my craft. That's what determines expertise. Yes? Okay. We've already talked about that. And this leads right into the next one, which is to think that we are the expert. There's a lot of ideas in the coaching industry that we have to be experts. We have to be perfect. We have to sell ourselves as experts and of what's happening to our clients in order for our clients to work with us. But I've actually found that that doesn't have to be the case, and that we are not the experts of our clients. Our clients are the experts of our clients. I remember when I first started in the coaching industry, I learned this idea that our clients don't know what's best for them because if they did, they'd already have what they want. The fact that they don't have what they want and they're going to you means that you are the expert. And it's a little bit like, wait, what? What's going on here? What's happening here? Like, how in any way, shape, or form am I the expert on someone else's life just because I have certain things that I want? Like, for example, just because I have done things this way, how does that mean that I'm now an expert to tell people how to do things this way? It just doesn't make sense. And I think we need to really humble ourselves, that we don't actually have to present as the expert. We don't actually have to know better than our clients in order for us to support our clients get the healing that they want. I recently stumbled upon a coach who, in their bio says, I clear trauma so that blah, 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 blah. And it's like, wow, that's a lot of expertise that she's placing on herself, that she herself clears your trauma, that you just have to go to her and she will clear your trauma by you paying her probably a fortune. And then you're going to be cleared of that trauma. That's exactly what I'm saying as a type of expertise that I think is really misleading and can cause a tremendous amount of harm because it implies that something is going to be done upon the client that then they're going to get the result that they want. And what's dangerous about this type of thinking is that it's these same coaches that then go off about how we're sovereign. Everyone is sovereign. The client is sovereign as long as the client does what the coach wants them to do, right? That's not sovereignty. If we're to truly believe that our clients are sovereign, it means that we have to meet our clients where they are at. We don't hold the power in the transformation. They do. We are not the experts of their lives. And so they're coming to us for guidance and support to walk them on this journey. But we are by no means the holder of their healing. And I think that type of marketing is really misleading and really harmful. And that leads to my next plate. The next thing that I think can create a lot of harm is thinking transactionally. Is thinking that our clients are paying us and then we offer them transformation. Bada bing, bada boom, right? It's really tantalizing to think that, they're paying us and now we deliver. We are a service provider. We offer a service. We deliver them the service that is our coaching that is then going to transform them. I think that this is really dangerous because it's not how healing actually works. This may be true in other areas of the coaching industry. If I am hiring a web designer, I am indeed paying money for them to create a website for me. That is a transaction for a service, or in this case, a good, right? I am working with a copy salesman, a copywriter. That's a service, right? They're writing me copy and I'm paying them money. Hopefully they're going to deliver on what I'm paying. That's the transaction, and that's wonderful. But what we're doing is we're doing emotional work. We can't offer something that's not within our capacity to offer because we are not the experts of our clients. And as we continue to market in this way in the industry, what tends to happen is I'll get clients who look at me like, okay, so where's the healing? Right? Like you say on your website that you healed the worthiness wound, so give it to me. What do I need to do now? And if you give me my your 5-step process, I will do the 5-step process and then I'll heal the worthiness wound. And it's a big conversation that we have to have about what that even means, because unfortunately, that's just not how I work. And I think for many depth coaches, that's not how we want to work. We don't believe that we hold all this power. And so there's a certain level of education and conversation that must be had to place the power back within our clients. That actually the capacity to heal the worthiness wound lies within you, and also because the worthiness wound is a relational wound, it exists within the relationship, and I will support you in knowing how that works and how to move through that. Yes? So when we think transactionally, when we think that we're the expert, we're really selling our clients this idea, this tantalizing idea that they just have to put in money and everything will then just heal itself. But unfortunately, and the truth of the matter is that in order for our clients to psychically heal from their deeper wounds, it will require them to do things differently. And we get to hold that differently, right? We get to hold what that difference looks like. That is fully within our scope as coaches. Okay, I have just a couple more. This obviously connects with all of this idea of misleading marketing. There's a lot. It's really rampant. And I've been talking about it a lot on my Instagram because I'm doing a lot of research for this series. I'm looking at a lot of coaches, and I don't usually look at other coaches' work because I stay focused on my lane. But because I want to really understand what's happening in the coaching industry so I can talk about it, I've been doing some research and looking into a lot of coaches and what they're saying. And there's just a lot of misleading marketing out there about what it really means to heal, what it really means to transform, what does it really mean to change. The coaching industry is really appearing like some grand, the marketing that's happening in the coaching industry is really grand. Like it's really selling a big dream about what is possible that is very not rooted in a reality where it's actually going to take a lot of really murky, dirty, painful work in order to change the things that we want to change internally. And so we, of course, want to be very careful about how we market, because the ways in which we mislead our clients into believing that we can offer something that we actually cannot offer, we can create harm. I did an Instagram live this past week called Marketing the Unmarketable, and you can go check it out. It's on my feed, about my own grapplings with this and how do we market our work when it is so hard to put words into what it is that we do. I received a beautiful testimonial about my work in the mentorship, and the woman, my mentee who wrote the testimonial, she started it with, I don't know how to put words to what I experienced in the mentorship. And it's like, isn't that interesting? Like how hard it often is for us to put words into what it is that we do. And so I want to read actually a little bit of her testimonial because I do think she actually puts into words quite beautifully. She says, I joined the mentorship because I was doing deep work with clients and wanted to ensure I wasn't moving outside of my scope of practice. Integrity is important to me, and I value the power of mentorship and the growth and learning that comes from supervision. I got that and so much more in this mentorship. I felt seen and accepted for my unique style of coaching and got to expand on that in this group. The small group experience was beyond valuable as I learned so much from the other coaches' shares and challenges. What I didn't expect was there to be space for my own wounds around the coaching industry as well as worthiness to surface. I've learned how to use the relationship between myself and clients as a catalyst for healing and shifting old patterns, which of course will always be a work in progress. I deepened my self-trust in holding space for my clients' processes and have gotten more comfortable with silence and slowing down rather than needing to fill the space with questions and constant talking. Honestly, words cannot do justice to how deeply this mentorship and the women in it have impacted me. Thaís is a beautiful mix of compassion and challenge, which supported me in thinking about things differently. There was so much room for nuance and complexity, which I truly appreciated. So, wonderful. Love that. It's hard. It's hard to find words, but we have to find words to market ourselves in a way that's nuanced and filled with complexity. Go check out my Instagram Live if you want to learn more about that. Okay, and then the final, this is a much smaller way that I have seen some coaches harm, is by experimenting on their clients without getting support for the experimentation. Much of what we do, I think, is experimentation. We experiment with what type of group we want to hold. We experiment with what type of length of container for our coaching we want to do. I have evolved my coaching practice over the past 10 years quite immensely, and a lot of that was through experimentation. And so we do on some weird language, and I really don't like naming it this way, but we do experiment on our clients to an extent, and we can do that quite responsibly. Experiment doesn't mean that we don't consider, we're not thoughtful, we're not really keeping in mind what's happening within our clients. However, if we are not mindful of the ways in which we are learning from our clients, if we're not being very intentional, then we really can cause harm because our clients are not experiments. Our clients are coming to us with their pain, with their challenges, with their wounds. They have to be held in high regard. And so there is a careful balance between evolving your coaching practice around what you're learning with your clients and experimenting on your clients in a way that can really harm. And so let's be mindful of that as well, okay? So those are just a few ways that we can cause harm to our clients. Now, there are some... let me think about this. I want to talk about ruptures, and I want to talk about rupture and repair because I think that this conversation doesn't actually happen quite often in the coaching industry. So let me get into that, okay? Rupture and repair. What am I even saying when I use those words? Rupture and repair comes from this kind of understanding of relationships where if you have two kind of differentiated, two full, healed, kind of securely attached humans, if we have two autonomous humans coming into relationship with each other, there is going to be rupture. Rupture is just another word for conflict, but I don't mean fighting. There's a difference between conflict and fighting. Fighting is something that I think can often be very poisonous because usually when we're fighting, we're using very dirty tactics. We're blaming, shaming, manipulating, we're getting defensive, we're attacking, we're name calling, we're doing all these kinds of things. That's what I define as fighting, and that's different than conflict. Conflict means I come into this relationship with my full heart. This other person comes into this relationship with their full heart. And look at that. We have differences. And sometimes those differences are wonderful. And sometimes those differences rub up against our own wounds or attachment patterns, or it challenges us in some way. And we don't appreciate the difference. The difference doesn't feel good. It actually hurts us, or something happens and now there's conflict or a rupture. And so part of learning secure attachment, or part of learning healthy relationships, whatever language we want to put in it, is knowing that ruptures is actually a very important part of relationshiping. If you don't have any conflict or any ruptures in your relationship, it's often a sign that one or both of you are not talking about what's happening. Because if you're talking about what's happening, you're talking about conflict. Okay, it is actually quite important. If there isn't conflict, there's probably non-differentiated humans in the relationship. There's a chronic fawn response. There's a people-pleasing. There's pushing down our own feelings, etc., etc. And so if rupture and repair are a healthy part of relating, if they are inevitable and happen in most relationships, particularly the more meaningful the relationship, the more likelihood there's going to be conflict, there's going to be a rupture. And then therefore, in order for the rupture to mean something, in order for it to be alchemized, digested, and tended to in the relationship in a way that will fortify the relationship, there has to be a repair. Repair is when we make sense of the rupture and come closer together as a result of the rupture. If there is chronic rupture without repair, it usually breaks the relationship down to the point of no return. So while rupture is an important part of relationship, part of that importance, part of what allows ruptures to actually strengthen a relationship is the ability to repair, the ability to come back after the rupture and communicate and talk about what happened and make sense of it together. Okay, rupture, repair. Without repair, ruptures can really deteriorate a relationship. Now, not all ruptures are meant to be fixed. There's a lot of ruptures that happen in relationships that just can't be taken away because they're just the result of two different humans coming into relationship. So repair doesn't mean that you're now on the same page. Repair doesn't mean that you prevent ruptures in the future. Repair doesn't mean that now suddenly that problem is erased. That problem may continue to exist in the relationship, and there may be tension as a result, but can you live in that tension and actually allow that tension to bring you two closer? There's a lot of aspects of particularly long-term relationships, like long-term marriage or partnership, where there needs to be a certain amount of understanding that ruptures and challenges are just a part of the relationship and can't always be just completely eradicated. Anyway, that's a whole other tangent. What happens if this happens in the coaching relationship? Now, I work with my clients in a very relational way, because a lot of times when we're talking about the worthiness wound, we're talking about relational trauma, and we can only heal relational trauma in the context of relationships. And so the way I work with my clients is very relationally, which is my own style, it's my own technique. I don't force this technique on my mentees. I really allow my mentees to cultivate their own coaching voice, their own unique style, like the testimonial said. But there is a way that I work with my clients because I found it to be very effective. And so if we're working relationally, it means that there's going to be rupture. And so when it does happen, when there's a misunderstanding, when I say something that doesn't land right, whenever I welcome it, because there's a real opportunity for us to understand and cultivate deeper insight into what's happening within my clients' internal experiences. Even if you don't work relationally, however, it is inevitable that if you're working with your clients, particularly longer term, if you're working with your clients for 6 months and more, or if you're working with them on a weekly basis, if you're having more contact time with your clients, then odds are a rupture is going to happen. And I would also even say, like, if rupture is not happening, you're probably limited in how much of transformation you can really offer your clients. And I know that that's a little bit of a big statement, but I really can back that up. Again, I'm not encouraging you to rupture your relationship with your clients. There's nothing you have to do. It generally just happens. And if you're holding a space enough where your clients feel really able to bring that stuff into the relationship, that's a huge sign that you're doing trauma-informed, careful work. If your clients have never, ever expressed any type of displeasure in anything you've ever said or done, I mean, I'm worried. I worry. There's something that's not happening. And it's probably because we're such people pleasers ourselves, and we want our clients to be happy with us. And so we kind of bend and accommodate so that we don't have to hurt our clients. Yes. But if you're causing harm, there's a difference, I think. I haven't thought that through, but I'm going to say that there's a difference between like the inevitable hurts that happen by two people being together and harm. And I don't know why I'm separating the two. So we're just going to move forward. Okay. Sometimes you are going to hurt Sometimes you're going to hurt your clients. You're going to say something that doesn't land with them, and it's not intentioned. You're not doing it intentionally. Please, please, please don't intentionally hurt your clients. What are you doing? That's not a thing. But sometimes it just happens. You say something and they're like, wait, are you blaming me for this? Right? You say something and they get defensive. Here's some ideas of what you can do if that happens, for how to use that rupture to walk into repair in a way that will support your clients who understand more about what's going on for them. Okay? First off, notice if you're getting defensive. That's really important. The more you know yourself, the more you know your wounds, the more you know where you're sensitive, the more you're going to be able to notice when you're getting defensive. Getting defensive is really, really not ideal in the coaching relationship because it means now you're taking it personally. You're making this be about you and the quality of your work and who you are and your worthiness and et cetera, and not making it be about the client. You're missing the point, which is if the client is feeling hurt by something, it's really... if you get defensive, then you're taking it personally, then you're making it be about who you are, and that defeats the purpose, which is that you may have hurt the person and it wasn't intentional, and that hurt probably rubs up against older hurts that they've had with other people that now have an opportunity to be examined and tended to and understood in a really compassionate and full way. Yes? So notice if you're getting defensive and take some breaths and instead seek to understand. Seek to understand. Oh, I hear that something I just said really hurt you. Can you give me more information? Can you tell me more? Can you help me understand? I really want to understand what's happening for you right now. It sounds like something I did, me rescheduling last week, last minute, really hurt you, and I want to talk about it. So open it up and seek to understand. You want to know more about it, not less. And we often know less when we defend or when we quickly apologize without really understanding. When we move too quickly into apologies, when we move too quickly into fixing the hurt, when we move too quickly into eradicating the misunderstanding, we're missing out on an opportunity to really understand what's happening here. And so again, really notice if you're getting defensive, really notice if you're moving quickly towards erasing the misunderstanding, and see if you can instead open the misunderstanding. I hear that when I say this, you really felt hurt by that. What do you make of that? How do you understand that? Tell me more. Has people said this to you in the past? Is this something that has often been said to you? And now suddenly you're opening up into a world that you may not have been privy of before, where, I grew up with people saying stuff like that to me. So I'm very sensitive to that. And it makes me feel like I'm really broken. It makes me feel really wounded, all that good, yummy stuff that now we can work with and we can give attention to and we can understand in the context of the relationship. Because while it, whether or not you intended to hurt, like, of course you didn't intend to hurt, but how often in our clients' lives do they move through rupture in a way that doesn't honor their experience? How often is conflict navigated by diminishing and making it small? And in this particular space, we have an opportunity to help our clients experience it differently. And that's what I really, really want us to think about here. So seek to understand. Now, the next thing that I like to do, particularly when something is much bigger, and I'm noticing myself get really defensive, or I'm noticing myself getting really confused because it's come out of nowhere, and this client has obviously been holding it for a long time, and they just finally got the courage to say something to me, and now I'm surprised, I'm taken back, I'm feeling a little disoriented. Something that I like to do for myself is I like to give myself time. I like to, I hear that you've been thinking about this for a long time, and now I'm finally catching up, and I really want to make sure I understand. And I also want to make sure that we give ourselves time so that I can I can think about this and we can come upon a decision together with both of us having had a lot of thought put into this. So can we continue to talk about this in our next session? And now that gives you time to really understand what has been going on for you and how you understand what's happening. That's the time that you can take this into your supervision. I invite my mentees to talk about this type of stuff with me. This is exactly what I want to work through, like what's going on, what's happening, what has been happening all this time, all of the information that can then help us go back into a session with our client, noticing our defenses, dropping ourselves back into what's happening for our clients and helping our clients make sense of this rupture. Notice that very little of this is rushing to fix. There will be a point where the fixing will happen, but what needs to be fixed will be determined by understanding what's happening here. And when we move too quickly into fixing, instead of really understanding, we're missing out. And we're possibly entering into colluding with a pattern that's been playing out with our clients. The cool thing about our coaching work is that we can really slow things down with our clients. And we can help our clients think about things that generally they would have rushed through, because that's how we do things. We kind of rush through things, and the coaching relationship is an opportunity to slow it down and really help think with our clients and make sense of what's happening so that we can then know how do we proceed and how we want to make sense of it. Yeah? So give yourself time. Give the relationship time. You don't have to rush through. Okay, repair will happen, but let yourself be in the tension a little bit. This actually is very applicable to any relationship, but we're talking about specifically the coaching relationship. And the more that we can learn how to tolerate ruptures in our lives and we can work through them, the more that we're able to tolerate it with our coaching clients. Okay. Now, this next bullet needs to be, I'm going to say it, but I'm saying it in a very specific way, and I want to explain. Assume that the client is right. Now, this is different than like the customer service realm of the client is always right, return whatever they want. No. It's not that we are now going to be bulldozed over. That's not what I mean by this. It just means that whatever the client is saying, they're speaking from a very real experience that they're having internally. It doesn't mean that what they are experiencing is what's happening, but what they are saying they're experiencing is what is happening for them internally. Emotions are data, not direction. They're not telling us what is happening. They're telling us what we are perceiving is happening. And that is the truth about their rupture experience. They are experiencing a rupture. They are experiencing something being misunderstood. And therefore, that is their internal experience. And that's important. It's important for us to not tell them, well, that's not what happened, or that's not what I meant, and negate that they're having an internal experience. And instead of trying to tell them, actually what's happening is this, we first seek to understand what it is that they're experiencing, because what it is that they're experiencing is their experience. Does that make sense? So instead of directly moving into, sorry, like that's not what I meant, that's what, we can be like, okay, you're really experiencing this as a misunderstanding, and therefore it is a misunderstanding. So let's understand so we can be back on the same page and we can decide what to do next. Yes? Now, I'm not going to tell you how to fix because I don't know. It's very contextual based. I don't know what the fixing, repairing is going to look like. That's different for every individual. But as long as you hold empathy, as long as you hold understanding, as long as you give yourself space, expand your own internal container for navigating conflict, then you'll be able to use this rupture that's happening in the coaching relationship to actually increase intimacy in the relationship and support your client navigate ruptures in other aspects of their lives differently. So this is a really cool place where a lot of magic can happen. And we don't talk about this in the coaching industry, do we? And we often see this as if there is something wrong, then, oh my God, it means all these bad things. And it doesn't. You're two humans in relationship together. Of course, misunderstandings or ruptures, mistakes are going to happen, and you can work them through together in the relationship. Yes? Okay, so that wraps up my conversation on harm, rupture, and repair. I hope this has been useful for you. I am going to be doing more Instagram lives. I'm thinking of doing it like once a week where I'm going to continue to talk about things that I'm seeing. I'm thinking maybe of doing an Instagram live this Wednesday talking about burnout in one-on-one coaching work and why we burn out. And so if you follow me on Instagram, stay tuned for that on Wednesday. Or if you don't follow me, come join me at I am Thaís Sky. I'm also thinking, now that I have my own office again, of recording my podcasts with a camera. Usually these podcasts are recorded through. I generally don't stop them. Sometimes I do, but oftentimes I kind of just riff for 50 minutes. And so I'm thinking of setting up a camera and then putting that on YouTube. I currently put my podcast on YouTube, but it's just an audio, and audio files obviously are not what YouTube is meant for. So thinking of doing that. Lots of exciting things coming our way. And like I said before, there is space in my mentorship. To learn more, go to thaissky.com/mentorship. I'm going to continue to talk about these things. It's really important. And we are the face of the coaching industry. Every coach is the face of the industry, and we have a responsibility for what we're sharing and how we're doing this work. And I appreciate you being willing to learn more and to expand your knowledge and to do this work wisely. I celebrate you. You are one of the few. You are really unique. If you've stuck with me this far in the podcast, wow, I celebrate you. I'm proud of you. You're doing incredible work. I believe in you. Keep going. Don't stop. It's not as sexy as the business coaches want you to believe it is, but don't worry. When we do this work in a way that feels really grounded, it feels good. And that matters more than anything. All right. I'll see you next week for the final part of this series with my mentees. I'm looking forward to it. I'll talk to you then.